So you want to compare today's housing market to 2008. And we're going to do that in this video. But I have to caution you, it is difficult to compare the two housing markets because while there are similarities, there's some vast differences, and we'll get into that right in this video. Real quick, if this is not your first time, welcome back, family. I appreciate you. But if this is your first time watching one of my videos, please go ahead and hit that like button and feel free to subscribe to the channel. On this channel, we talk about real estate and personal finance, and we might touch on Charlotte here and there as well. So I greatly appreciate you hitting that like button and leaving a comment. It helps me out tremendously. Now, many factors can influence the housing market, and these factors can change over time. However, there are some things to consider. In 2008, the United States was in the midst of a housing market crisis. And right now, we're in the middle of an affordability crisis. But in 2008, the housing market was characterized by a large number of foreclosures and a significant decline in home values. This crisis was caused by a number of factors, including a surge in subprime mortgages, lax lending standards, and a collapse of the subprime mortgage market. Now, I can go into depth regarding all of those things, but I'm sure you've seen and heard videos about that. Today, the United States housing market is generally considered to be in a strong position, although it is quite unaffordable and prices have been coming down the past quarter. But you have to look at the time of year. In the fall and winter of every year, prices decline and retract. We won't really know what's going to happen until the springtime when historically prices start to shoot back up again. But let's talk about what we know right now. We know that prices are at all-time highs and housing affordability is a serious issue for most Americans. It is the lowest on record in the past 10 to 15 years. And in the majority of the United States, there's a housing shortage. There's a lack of supply of homes. Now, while prices have come down out west, and in markets with a strong iBuyer presence, we're talking Austin, we're talking Phoenix, we're talking Sacramento, we're talking Las Vegas. Those prices have softened dramatically. However, the rest of the United States have seen just about the seasonal decline that you would see on a typical year. Now, the past 2 years have been anything but typical because of the pandemic and the extremely low interest rates. Those extremely low interest rates pushed demand forward. It caused a lot of people that were sitting on the sideline to act faster than they normally would have. I can speak from personal experience. I had no intention of buying a new home. But when I saw mortgage rates start to creep up, I decided to jump in and buy a home, even though I was about a year or 2 years away than when I felt comfortable. I did not want to miss out on the historic low interest rates. And I'm glad I did, because had I waited, I would not be able to afford the house that I live in right now, because interest rates went up over 100% in 2022. But my man Logan recently put an article out on Housing Wire. Now, Logan is an excellent follow on Twitter. I'll put his Twitter handle right here. Please, if you're a housing nerd, you have to follow him. I have to caution you. He's a big 49ers fan. So if you can tolerate some of his 49er tweets, you will be right at home. Now, the title of this article that was released December 29th, 2022 is Comparing This Housing Market Recession to 2008. Now, before some of you get offended by the title, he goes on to clarify what he means by recession. While our economy in the United States is not in a recession technically, right now in 2022, heading into 2023, the housing market is in a bit of a recession. You've seen a drastic pullback in purchases, purchase applications, mortgage applications. They've fallen off a cliff since rates went up. And he goes on to highlight that the housing market is in a recession due to these 4 factors. You have the fall in sales, you have the lack of production of homes, you have jobs being lost in the housing market. Every other week you've seen mortgage companies go under or mortgage companies laying off thousands and thousands of brokers. And we've seen incomes go down. Because there's less transactions, income has gone down for everybody in the housing market. Realtors, mortgage brokers, builders, sellers, everybody has taken less because there's been less sales since the end of summer. It's a crazy thing to think about because in January of 2022, mortgage rates were in the threes, and we're still having multiple offers and bidding wars for just about every property that hit the market. And now in late 2022, you have homes sitting on the market for 30, 60, 90 days. Hell, there's a home in my neighborhood is sitting on the market for about 120 days. Man, times have changed. Now when comparing 2008 to 2022, let's look at home sales. Now when looking at home sales, let's first look at mortgage purchase applications because one has to apply for a mortgage purchase application before they can buy a home, at least 90% of the time, because people are usually financing their home loan. If you look at the chart, the years leading up to 2008, you had a drastic increase in purchase applications from about 2002 all the way up to 2005, and then it went down and it picked back up in 2007 to 2008. Now, when you compare it to today's market, you will see that there really hasn't been that drastic upshot in purchase applications. You see where purchase applications dropped drastically when COVID hit, the COVID lockdowns hit back in April of 2020. But the years prior to that, purchase applications were around the 300 mark. In 2002 to 2005, you saw those range from 300 to 500. In recent years, we never passed the purchase index of over 400. So yes, it has gone up, but it has not grown up as drastically and as steep as it did back in 2002 to 2005, leading up to the crash in 2008. That's because back then you had very lax credit guidelines and anybody could get a mortgage. Right now, you have some of the strictest guidelines when it comes to getting a mortgage. Now, let's look at existing home sales and compare 2008 to 2022, and we'll see the differences there as well. Again, I want to shout out Logan. He did an excellent job compiling all this data and putting it in this article. But let's jump into existing home sales and compare 2008 to 2022. If you look here, existing home sales peaked in late 2005, early 2006, and they hit rock bottom in 2009. That was an extended period of time. It took a long time to get there. But right now, in today's environment, we see that existing home sales fell in the matter of a year. And there are a number of ways you can interpret that data. Now, you can interpret it and say that because the drop was so severe this year, that we're going to have a worse housing crash than 2008. Or you can look at it as I look at it. I look at it and say, yes, existing home sales fell off a cliff, but we have to look at why. In 2008, they fell off a cliff, or 2006 to 2009 fell off a cliff because nobody could get approved for a loan. Nobody was buying a home because they put a lock on credit. Well, today, nobody's buying a home, and existing home sales have come down drastically for two reasons. One, affordability is through the roof. It is unaffordable to buy a home. And then two, mortgage interest rates is a huge deterrent from people selling and buying a home. Think about it. If you have an existing home and you were able to refinance when the mortgage rates were in the 2s, 3s, 4s, or even 5s, why would you sell that home when mortgage rates are in the 7s? It doesn't make sense. You're going to get maybe a better home, but you're going to be paying 2 to 3 times as much for a home. And for a lot of people, that math just doesn't work. So in addition to looking at how things happen, you should also consider why they happen, because that is the story that is often being overlooked when people are talking about a housing crash and what to expect moving forward. Now let's look at housing inventory. Let's compare housing inventory to 2008 compared to today's housing inventory. And I believe that is a huge telltale sign for what you can expect moving forward in this housing market. Now, I've been saying this for quite some time, that we will not have a housing crash because we just don't have enough inventory. We have millennials coming to the prime age of buying a home, and there's just not enough homes for there to be a housing crash because the limited inventory is causing people to compete. Now, I will concede, homes have and will continue to sit on the market longer, But you have not seen that huge price reduction that you're expecting year over year. In fact, in 2022, we're still going to see about a 9% annual housing appreciation nationally. Now, there are some pockets of the country that may see year over year declines, but on a national scale, there will not be a housing crash because there's not enough inventory. And you've heard toward the end of this year how housing prices have come down drastically. Yeah, they've come down 3, 4, 5%. But what's 3, 4, 5% when they were up 40% in the past 2.5 years? Now let's jump into this data. You'll see that housing inventory climbed in between 2002 to 2005 and at the peak in 2008. But since then, housing inventory has come down to the lowest levels on record since the early 80s. And this data comes from the National Association of Realtors. Presently, we have about 1.14 million homes available in inventory, but that is drastically lower than at the peak in 2008. 2008, there were about 4 million homes for sale. Now, demand has fallen significantly in the past 6 months, but there's still just a limited amount of inventory for the people that want homes. Now let's look at housing credit and compare today to 2008. And again, you will see the vast differences in the health of our housing market. Now, as you look at this chart, which goes over the number of consumers with new foreclosures and bankruptcies, you will see that bankruptcies shot up almost fourfold. And then following that, you saw foreclosures creep up. From 2006, 2007 to 2008, you'll see a steep line in foreclosures. Now compare that to present day, you will see that bankruptcies are at near all-time lows, and you'll see that foreclosures, although they have been picking up in 2022, they're still at historic lows. So I know a lot of you follow these channels that talk about bankruptcies up 150%, and they like to scare you. But if you look at the data, you'll see that bankruptcies and foreclosures are at or near record all-time lows. So when you put that in perspective, that very low number of people in foreclosure or bankruptcy will not cause inventory to shoot up to levels that we've seen in 2008 to cause there to be a supply-demand inversion. Now let's look at delinquency rates, people that are behind on their mortgage over 90 days. Now this is the number of single-family homes that are in serious delinquency, meaning they're late 90 or more days. Now as you look at this chart, you'll see that serious delinquencies started rising in 2008 and 2009, and they peaked in 2010. But if you look at present day, yes, you see where serious delinquencies shot up in early 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. And if you look at the time right now, you will see that they're right around historic norms. So these charts highlight the vast differences. Now, I understand the similarities between 2008 and 2022. But when you look at data, it's hard to ignore the truth. A lot of people are selling you dreams and want you to live on hopium, meaning they want you to hope that there's going to be a housing crash. But if you look at the data, the numbers just do not bear that out. For starters, Americans are in a better financial position now than they were in 2008. And the most often overlooked point when comparing 2008 to 2022 is the cost of rent. Back in 2008, when people got foreclosed on and decided to just walk away from their property a lot of times, they knew that they can rent another home in the neighborhood and paid less monthly for their housing expense because the home they had an adjustable rate mortgage and it shot up. They could go to live in the same neighborhood and pay significantly less. Right now, the inverse is true. People that have a 2, 3, 4, or 5% interest rate are going to hold on to that property and not want to move. Even if they lose their job and cannot pay their mortgage, they're going to do everything they can to stay in that mortgage because they know that the alternative means they'll be costing them more and more money. It would be more expensive for people that had a 2, 3, 4, or 5% mortgage rate to go rent a house than to pay their existing mortgage. So in conclusion, are we in a housing recession just like 2008? Yes, we are in a housing market recession. But is it anything like 2008? It's not even close. There are vast differences in the circumstances of this housing market recession versus the housing market recession in 2008. Again, thank you to Logan for this article. I'm Sir Ashley. Talk to you soon.